My name is Avery, and I'm a 35-year-old housewife. Just the other day, I gave birth to twin brothers, Ryan and Aiden. It took 2 days from the onset of labor until delivery, and I was physically exhausted. However, when I saw my children born and crying healthily, all that fatigue disappeared in an instant. My children was so precious. Originally, I had plans to stay at my parents' house for a while after giving birth. However, 1 month before my delivery, my mother was hospitalized for surgery. My parents were eagerly anticipating my arrival with the babies. Especially, my mother assured me that she would be fine even after her surgery. She kept telling me to bring the babies along. But this time, we decided to prioritize my mother's health, and we canceled the visit. My husband and I decided to support each other and do our best as a couple. However, what was supposed to be a joyful parenting experience turned out to be something unimaginable. What I'm about to tell you is the story of the severe harassment I experienced as a daughter-in-law. On the 3rd morning after I gave birth to the twins and returned to our apartment, the doorbell suddenly rang loudly.
"Who is it this early in the morning?"
I peered through the peephole in anger. It turned out to be my mother-in-law standing outside the door.
"Huh, Mary? What's going on?"
When I quickly unlocked the door, my mother-in-law forcefully swung it open and entered the room. She barged in, making a loud noise as she entered the house. Ryan, who heard the noise, woke up, and Aiden followed suit. Yesterday, they had been crying a lot during the night and had trouble sleeping. So when they finally fell asleep, I thought, finally, they're sleeping. But my mother-in-law ruined it all. I learned that she had taken a taxi just to come here. I couldn't simply turn her away, so I reluctantly headed towards the kitchen and attempted to serve some tea and snacks.
"Oh my, what a dirty room. My son is living in such a place?" "Avery, just because you gave birth to children doesn't mean you should neglect housework, right?"
My mother-in-law traced the window frames with her finger, as if she were a spiteful mother-in-law from a period drama, checking for any dust.
"I'm sorry, but the babies were crying a lot last night, and I hardly slept. I'll clean up once things settle down."
Saying that, as I tried to comfort the crying twins, she swatted my hand away and took them in her arms.
"I'll take care of the twins, so don't worry. Not sleeping? That doesn't matter. Don't rest just because of that. As a daughter-in-law, you should do the housework quickly."
Despite being sleep-deprived and on the verge of collapse, she demanded that I do the housework immediately. No matter how much I explained, my mother-in-law was so absorbed in the twins that she didn't listen to me. When I reluctantly prepared the milk and was about to hand it to my mother-in-law, she said, "What?
Are you preparing milk? Normally, as a mother, you should be breastfeeding, shouldn't you? What a cold-hearted parent you are."
Hearing the comment about the thing I cared most about, I felt shocked and tears welled up. Holding back the tears, I obediently cleaned the room as instructed. My mother-in-law said she would take care of babies, but she only half-heartedly attended to them. Whenever she needed to change the diapers, instead of doing it herself, she would call me, who was busy with household chores, to do it. Housework didn't go smoothly, and I had no idea why she had come in the first place. Furthermore, not just this day but for the next 2 months, my mother-in-law would come over every day, and still only casually attend to the babies. She would endlessly complain about me, which was just agonizing. I thought about discussing it with my husband, but he was busy with work and came home exhausted every day, so I couldn't find the right time to bring it up. I have endured my mother-in-law's sarcastic remarks for 2 months. When she said she wouldn't come starting from tomorrow, I thought, finally, I was freed from this kind of life. I was overjoyed, but it didn't last long. Suddenly, my mother-in-law held out her right hand in front of me. "Come on, hand it over quickly. For 2 months' transportation expenses, and for helping with childcare, that's the gratitude. Normally, that's what you should do, right?" To my surprise, my mother-in-law asked me to give her the transportation expenses and gratitude combined. By her words, something inside me snapped.
What are you talking about? When did I ask you to help me? If I had asked for your help, it would be a different story, but I didn't ask. In fact, I've been extremely uncomfortable during these 2 months. Please never come back again.
Saying that, I kicked my mother-in-law out of the house. Immediately afterwards, I packed up my things and went back to my parents' home with the twins. I felt sorry for my mother, but staying there was unbearable. On the other hand, my mother-in-law exposed what happened this time to my father-in-law and husband. She apparently told them that she was working so hard, but I said terrible things to her. When my husband returned home and found us gone, he was shocked. He asked me about the situation, and the next day, he stormed off to his parents' house. My father-in-law, who had only heard my mother-in-law's side of the story, turned pale as soon as he heard my husband's account and said,
"It's over. What have you done?"
Suddenly, my father-in-law started raging against my mother-in-law. He is usually mild-mannered and rarely gets angry over small things. Even my husband said he had never seen his father so enraged before. My husband couldn't close his gaping mouth, and my mother-in-law was flustered.
"Ha! Wait, why are you so angry? The one at fault is your daughter-in-law, right? I did it with Avery in mind. I went out of my way to spend transportation expenses, all in order to reduce the burden of childcare, even if just a little. So why am I the one being scolded?"
My mother-in-law's argument was that she acted with me in mind, claiming she did nothing wrong.
No, you don't understand anything. Do you even know who her grandfather is?
My father-in-law, trembling with anger, stared at my mother-in-law with widened eyes. "What? Who? That tough-looking old man at the wedding? I remember how you were flattering and bowing to him. So what? Don't tell me you're being threatened by that old man?"
No. That person is the chairman of my company.
Upon hearing those words, my mother-in-law unintentionally exclaimed,
"Ha!"
In fact, my grandfather is the chairman of a large corporation. My wedding was a fairly significant event, with several presidents of well-known companies attending. My grandfather was strict with himself and others, not one to smile or engage in light-hearted conversations, but he doted on me, his grandchild, tremendously. Every time we met, he would buy me expensive toys and take me to high-class restaurants. I was raised being cherished by my grandfather. When I got married, that tough-looking grandfather shed tears of joy, as I later heard from my grandmother, and everyone there was surprised. Knowing how much my grandfather doted on me, there was no way he would stay silent if he knew what my mother-in-law was doing. In normal circumstances, just that knowledge alone would leave someone speechless. However, there was another reason why my father-in-law didn't want my grandfather to find out.
Well, you know, I'm about to be promoted to a managerial position. If I become a manager, my salary will increase significantly. This is the time to work hard, but you don't even understand my feelings. Creating such a problem. What exactly are you thinking?
My father-in-law didn't really care about me. Right now, he's only focused on his promotion, not the well-being of my family. Knowing his father's true intentions, my husband, despite being his own parent, seemed genuinely disappointed that he didn't care about our twins or me even a bit. That's enough. I'm disappointed in my dad, who only thinks about yourself. I'm also shocked by Mom's mistreatment. Please stay away from us. My mother-in-law, who had been cut off by her own son, approached my husband with great intensity.
Don't joke around. You're the heir of this family, right? I won't allow you to abandon this house. I'll go to Avery's place and convince her. As a daughter-in-law, she should properly take care of the house.
Upon hearing this, my father-in-law said to my mother-in-law,
You're not thinking of barging into Avery's parents' house, are you? Don't do something like that. It would ruin my chances for promotion. Don't do anything unnecessary.
Upon hearing those words, my husband left without saying a word. He immediately came to my parents' home and explained the situation and apologized. His face seemed more sad than angry. I never thought that my own parents would be like this. It's truly pathetic. My parents didn't say anything in response to my husband's words. Well, since you're here, why don't you have dinner with us? Take your time, Thomas. You could even stay overnight if you want. Yeah, it's so close from here to your apartment. So just bring a change of clothes, right? At first, my husband was hesitant about my parents' goodwill, but the desire to spend quality time with the twins overwhelmed him, and he ended up staying at my parents' house. It was a rare opportunity for parents-children bonding. Seeing my husband holding the crying twins gently in his arms, it was somehow heartwarming. When we went to sleep, we positioned the twins in the middle, with me and my husband on either side. Ah, if only we could have peaceful moments like this forever, I thought. However, it was unimaginable that my mother-in-law would stay silent. Deep down, I had a lingering concern that she would eventually make an unwelcome visit. But no one at that time thought that my mother-in-law would come barging in so soon. The next day, while my parents were absent for work, the doorbell at my parents' home suddenly rang repeatedly. Anxiously, I peeked through the intercom. And to my surprise, my mother-in-law had come barging into my parents' house.
Open the door! I know someone is inside. Give me back my grandchildren.
While saying that, she kept banging on the door. Due to her aggressive behavior, the peacefully sleeping twins woke up, and outside, my mother-in-law kept ringing the doorbell and banging on the door. The twins were crying loudly, and I felt like I was losing my mind. Then, someone else opened the front door in my place. Finally, the door is open. Now quickly, huh? Who are you? The person who opened the door in my place was my grandfather.
Who is this? A disrespectful person who pounds on someone's door like this. Isn't it rude?
Grandfather, who seemed to be displeased, spoke to my mother-in-law in a stern voice. With his tough demeanor and being addressed in such a way, even my mother-in-law, who is usually composed, was taken aback and unable to say anything with her frozen face in surprise. I can't believe it, but... Are you the chairman that my husband mentioned? My mother-in-law, with a trembling voice, addressed my grandfather. Oh, now that you mention it, I remember. Are you Thomas's mother-in-law? We didn't exchange greetings at the wedding, so I didn't know who you were. My mother-in-law had opposed our marriage from the beginning. It seemed like she believed she was losing the son she had raised with great care, and she insisted on not attending the wedding. However, thanks to persuasion from people around her, she reluctantly attended the wedding. She didn't greet any of my relatives, and spent the entire time with a sullen face in the waiting room. So it wasn't surprising that my grandfather didn't remember her. Upon realizing it was my mother-in-law, my grandfather's expression became even more stern, as he stared at her trembling figure. I had shared everything about the ordeals I went through with my grandfather. He probably anticipated that my mother-in-law would come barging into this house, so he had stayed here for a while. Well, the truth was that he wanted to visit and see the great-grandchildren I had given birth to, but he surely didn't expect her to show up so soon. I didn't come here to harass Avery, you know? I just couldn't bear it when Avery brought the twins here without saying a word. I came because I felt lonely and wanted to see them, you know? It's terrible of her not to say anything to me. She insisted that she only came to see the twins, and didn't come to harass me. However, I couldn't believe her words. Considering how she repeatedly pressed the intercom and banged on the door, shouting for me to return her grandchildren. I see. However, earlier you said to my granddaughter that she should return your grandchildren, didn't you? When did those children become your possession? My mother-in-law couldn't overlook these words, and she countered my grandfather.
What are you talking about? Those children are my grandchildren from our family lineage. Especially Ryan is the heir of the main branch. They are our legitimate grandchildren. They are not your grandchildren.
Indeed, my mother-in-law doted on the twins, because Ryan was the heir. She also showed affection for Aiden, but it was Ryan, as the heir, who received the most love. I understand your feelings of affection towards the twins. However, does that justify neglecting their precious mother? Isn't it quite terrible what you've done, forcing your way into the home of my granddaughter, who is exhausted after giving birth? My mother-in-law was startled by these words, her face turning pale once again.
You wouldn't tell my husband about this, right? I was explicitly told not to come here. I don't want it to be known.
Despite being explicitly told not to come here, she had come on her own accord. If my father-in-law found out about this, he might serve her with divorce papers. That's why she pleaded with my grandfather to keep her visit here a secret. However, there was no way he would listen to such a request. In response to her confusion, my grandfather said, "What are you talking about? There's no need to hide it. If you have guilty feelings, it's even more reason to reveal it. I will inform your husband that you came to visit us. Now, that's enough. Next time, make sure to schedule an appointment before coming." With those final words, he closed the front door. Normally, my mother-in-law would have repeatedly banged on the door and pressed the intercom, but this time, there was my grandfather, the chairman, present in the house. So, she seemingly left quietly this time. My mother-in-law didn't mention her visit to my parents' house, but a few days later, my grandfather called my father-in-law to his office and explained what had happened. Despite being explicitly told not to go to our house, my mother-in-law had gone on her own, and my father-in-law clearly displayed his anger. I apologize deeply for my wife's thoughtless actions. I assure you that something like this will never happen again. My father-in-law bowed deeply and apologized to my grandfather. He had to apologize to protect his chances of promotion. However, my grandfather wasn't so easily deceived that he couldn't see through my father-in-law's true feelings. Indeed, what your wife did is inexcusable. But don't you bear some responsibility as well? Aren't you only concerned with immediate matters and unaware of the people around you? There are serious complaints about you from the field. I can't let someone like that become a manager." In the end, my father-in-law's promotion was cancelled. Blaming my mother-in-law for his failure to get promoted, my father-in-law returned home and unleashed his anger on her. Finally, he slammed a pre-filled divorce form on the table, packed his belongings, and left. My mother-in-law had relied solely on my father-in-law's salary for their livelihood. So being abandoned by him meant she couldn't sustain her life anymore. She tried to persuade him, but it was already too late. The situation had become irreparable.
All of this is because of that woman. I wish she hadn't married our dear Thomas. Unforgivable, absolutely unforgivable.
Having lost everything, my mother-in-law became desperate and stormed into my parents' house. She banged on the door and shouted loudly,
"It's all because of you that I've lost everything. If it wasn't for you, give them back. Give me my grandchildren back. Return Thomas."
By this time, it was already past 9 p.m. It was extremely inappropriate to be shouting and banging on the door at this hour. Unable to bear it any longer, my husband made a call to the police. My mother-in-law was taken away by the police officer who arrived at the scene, escorted to a police car, and driven to the police station. Even until the very end, he apologized to my parents and my grandfather for causing trouble, but I knew that it wasn't my husband's fault. Finally, our home could enjoy peace. I felt a sense of relief. Now, there won't be anyone to disturb us anymore. Hopefully, we can finally have a peaceful life. It was truly unfortunate that it had come to this outcome, but I felt relieved that we could finally settle down and focus on raising our children. Afterward, my in-laws divorced, and my mother-in-law returned to her parents' home. Their house is in a remote countryside area, with only a few bus services a day. And my mother-in-law doesn't have a driver's license, so it would be difficult for her to come here easily. It seems that my mother-in-law, who wanted to have exclusive access to her grandchildren, is finding it tough to live without seeing them. She has repeatedly asked my husband to arrange meetings with the grandchildren, and expressed a desire to reconcile with me. However, my husband couldn't forgive his selfish mother's actions, and blocked her calls, making it impossible to reach him. Unable to see her grandchildren, and having been cut off by her son, my mother-in-law has become completely distraught. She cries daily to her own parents, expressing her longing to see her grandchildren. However, even her own parents, who know the circumstances, have refrained from sympathizing with her. Having truly lost everything, my mother-in-law has isolated herself in her room, shedding tears of regret every day.